There was a number of budget phono preamps that hit the market this year, right around that $100 price point. And while I thought they did a good job at that price point, I still found myself going back to the IFI Phono in most cases. While these ultra budget friendly picks, they did do a pretty good job, even a great job for the price that you pay. I would still say that a very reasonable jump up to that $200 to $300, that gave me enough of a positive change to say it's actually worthwhile in most cases. IFI reached out and asked if I wanted to check out the new version 3, so I figured why not. At $249, it still falls within the budget realm of phono preamps, and while it costs a bit more than some of the really budget designs, it steps things up in several areas over these. Let's cover why this $249 preamp might be everything a vinyl listener needs. The Zen Phono 3 maintains IFI's signature aluminum chassis design. I don't know what you want to call this look, maybe something like mid-century industrial. This new look carries the same shape, but with more of a refined, more sophisticated aesthetic compared to the previous model. Nothing says sophistication like imitation leather, am I right? All jokes aside, it is a good upgrade in my opinion over the previous model. They went from this brushed aluminum face to something with a bit more touch to it. The front also gained a ton of functionality over the previous model, so we'll get into that as well in just a little bit here. Lastly, the solid metal housing on phono preamps isn't just for looks. It does provide crucial shielding for sensitive phono circuitry inside, in this case helping to achieve what I found to be impressively low noise levels. If we compare the outgoing model head to head, it's the same chassis as you can see, but the look is further refined and usable if I'm being honest. The original front was a bit much with that very reflective brushed aluminum, and the LEDs, showing the gain, they were a little bit hard to distinguish. Now compare that to the new model where everything is clear, the gain and cartridge selections are much easier to see, plus we have this new button here for cartridge loading, which I feel is one of the best additions to the Zen 3. Now we're able to mix and match the gain and load settings independently, which in theory should open you up to different cartridge options. You still adjust the gain on the rear of the unit just like the previous, but all your options for setting up the carts, they're gonna be on the front. I would have been fine with that being on the rear as well with the gain, but honestly, I'll take either of those over the switches on the bottom of the unit. If we look at the rear of the Phono 3, you're gonna notice it actually doesn't differ at all from the previous outgoing model, but the good news there is we weren't really missing anything on the original design. We have two output options, balanced over 4.4, which you're gonna need to purchase an adapter or a cable if you wanna go that route. In most cases, the standard RCA right next to it, that's gonna be plenty, but you may wanna consider balance if the cable length is gonna be longer in your setup. We get the same ground post, it accepts spades or banana plugs, the RCA inputs where the turntable is gonna feed in, and then simply the gain selections. MM at 36 dB, MC high at 48, MC low at 60, and MC very low at 72. I would guess the majority of users are going to be shopping this for an MM cart, but I did test this on both a vintage table running a Shure M91ED moving magnet cart, as well as this MC cart, the Denon DL103R. And the Phono 3 actually did a very respectable job on both fronts. I really do think it's great that this can handle the MC carts, but as most of these cartridges cost multitudes more than the price of the Phono 3, I mostly see this pairing up with MMs and doing a fine job of it. But you can't deny the versatility here for the user who wants both. If you guys, gals, could please consider throwing me a like, comment, even a subscription. I have enough content lined up right now to last the entire year, so stick around and find out what's coming up next. Appreciate you guys. Now I really want to touch on this subsonic filter. IFI states that standard subsonic filters aren't intelligent and are typically loathed by audiophiles. While I wouldn't say that I loathe them, I do generally avoid them. They go on to saying that, the typical filter, it filters the bass rumble from warped records, as well as the bass that you're trying to keep. They claim their intelligent subsonic filter knows the difference and only filters the warp. So here's my take on that and generally how I felt the feature worked on the Phono 3. I personally don't use them more than I need to. I won't say that I never use them because I have ran into albums where that subsonic filter improved the sound. And when I say improve, I just mean that it sort of cleans things up. So I do use them, but only if I need to, because I've always felt like the transparency was mildly affected when these filters were on. On a positive note with their implementation, I tested the filter with a bass-heavy track and didn't really notice any difference with the bass response with the filter on or off. And that's a very positive thing, so it looks like, at the very least, they implemented it well here. Just a general tip if you're new to vinyl, if you notice your woofer is sort of pumping during playback, independent from the music, a filter like this can help in a lot of cases. I'm not going to deep dive into this area, but I do want to highlight that IFI does tend to put focus on high quality components inside their units. They've been well constructed in the models that I've had in, and in general, the measurements do reflect it. At under $300, this one does have an exceptionally low noise floor. IFI has incorporated technology to reduce that noise floor, which is very much critical on vinyl. Even when noise isn't explicitly audible, it can blur details and obscure some of the subtle distinctions that make vinyl listening special. I found the Zen Phono 3's noise reduction is particularly noticeable when using low output moving coil cartridges that require high gain settings. Having a near silent background at this price point is truly remarkable, and why you need to keep this one under your consideration. On to some real world listening experiences. I tested the Zen Phono 3 with several different cartridge and turntable combinations to gauge its versatility. I think this is a very much so balanced sound signature that leans more into the analytical and neutral, rather than in some cases the previous one that I felt like it had more of a warm characteristic. It's not to say this is bright or glaring. I actually prefer the sound of the new model over the previous on the original. Now let's take a look at what some might consider some very different listening material to assess the versatility here. First up, Metallica, Master of Puppets. It's very much so a high energy track. The bass keeps its definition throughout, rather than, conceding into more of a muddy thump. The guitars reign supreme on this track with good attack without bringing along the harshness that some of the budget-friendly phono preamps can in some cases introduce. In general, great instrument separation between lead and bass, great intensity across the board without ever feeling like it's condensed or congested. As there is always room for improvement in everything from budget to ultra expensive, if anything, this track was able to show that while the Phono 3 did an admirable job, it could still go further into the dynamic range to make things really come alive. Now we're gonna go for a total shift, and this one is AJR from the OK Orchestra album. This track is called Way Less Sad, which is more of like a modern presentation with electronic and acoustic elements. The electronic sound flourished on this one, but it didn't overstep the vocals. It's a clean sounding track with a lot of playful harmonies. What stood out to me during my listening was everything carrying the appropriate weight without bleeding into each other. This is one of those tracks that, it could have really benefited from more of that expected vinyl warmth. There's just plainly a lot of digital going on here, and I wouldn't mind it playing back with, just a touch more warmth. And this one really isn't the fault of the 3, but rather an example of how the track can really influence your preferences. Now let's take a look at another track, this time from the 70s, that matches right up with the turntable here. And that's Head East's Never Been Any Reason from the Flat as a Pancake album. The Phono 3 showed its ability to handle vintage tracks with ease while not losing out on the expected character of a pressing from this time. The synthesizer intro sounds rich, the lead guitar is distinctive, the vocals had great mid-range transparency, the harmonics felt fully expressed. The Phono 3 was able to capture the natural warmth without adding anything on top of it that might take away from some of the key character sounds. This one was very much so the opposite of AJR. It basically gave me exactly what I expected, which was fantastic to hear. As for the value proposition on this one, at $249, the Zen Phono 3 represents extraordinary value. For listeners with turntables under $2,000 and modest systems, this entry-level phono preamp would be my pick in the 300 or less category, which would personally place it above like the Manny 2 or some of the recent releases from Fozzy and Aima. What makes it particularly value is its flexibility and headroom for future growth. As you upgrade your cartridge from MM to MC, or even in between different MC cartridges with varying output levels, the Zen Phono 3 has sufficient adjustability to remain relevant. What I think is really remarkable about this one is you could integrate this unit into a high-end system, and listeners would likely never be able to guess that they were listening to a $249 phono preamp until you switched to something, much more expensive. That level of transparency and precision at this price point is truly exceptional. As for who this one's for, I think the IFI Zen Phono 3 is perfect for the vinyl enthusiast looking to upgrade from a built-in phono stage, those with multiple cartridges needing, just more flexibility load options, and listeners with modest systems who want maximum performance without excessive costs. Even serious audiophiles looking for, maybe a second phono stage for a secondary system. For the majority of us who don't need an exotic $5,000 phono preamp, I know I don't, the Zen Phono 3 provides all the performance most vinyl listeners will ever need. I like it, and I think you guys will too. Check out some of my other videos. I have content on vinyl, CDs, all of the gear, even some DIY. I recently just wrapped up a video on building out some really nice bass traps on a budget. And also, I'd really appreciate if you guys could like, comment, and subscribe so I can keep bringing more videos to the community. Take care, talk soon, later.